Hey everybody, Adam Savage at FBFX, along with the head of soft costume here, Bex. How are you?
Good, thank you. You all right?
And we are joined by one of this department's creations. This is clearly Moon Knight. I can't believe how beautiful this thing is, but it's also way more detailed than I even imagined watching the show. Can we talk about it? This looks like an absolute bear of a costume to build.
I mean, it was really a labour of love. All done in lockdown. The original Moon Knight concept was by Marvel's head of visual development, Ryan Meinerding, and we were actually collaborating with the costume designer, Meghan Kasperlik, over Zoom to create the suits.
One of the things I'm used to seeing on superhero costumes is the illusion of layers. What I see here is layers.
First of all, the main remit was bandages. How do we make something look like a bandage and it can't take a million years for them to dress? And we went through various iterations, various different methods until we realised the way to do it is with individual strips. You're imitating the bandage and you're imitating this wrapping over through all these individual pieces. And once we'd made that realisation through all our tests, then we started to build the whole thing.
So you're doing that. There's no seam around here where you're making a pattern and then sewing it together.
Yeah.
So does that mean that every single piece is custom fit to that part of the body?
Yes, exactly. And we want to do things like, you don't want a visible underarm seam, all those things which make it read as a sleeve.
Yeah.
We had to get rid of. All of these pieces, there's a bonding technology that we use. Everything is bonded as well as sewn and glued. So all the techniques into one costume, really. Yeah.
How many separate pieces make up this costume?
We did spend one day where we counted them all, and it was 1,013 in total, individually cut pieces.
And there's not just soft parts. There's gold. There's all this gold shielding underneath. This means you're collaborating with other departments to get all this together.
Yeah, this is the wonderful thing about this costume. It's like one of the projects where everyone's works so closely together, because all of these elements have to interact and have to look like, we don't want it to look like it's just being placed on. It wants to feel like this was meant to feel like it was in with the wrapping.
Yeah.
That all of these pieces are attached in with this method. So this involved creating these pieces. Underneath here, there's plenty of detail that you don't see, but there's hidden hieroglyphs.
So this is all detailed underneath here. Oh my God.
There's a wing under here and here. And on some of them, we actually made it so that the Moonerang could come out and he could throw it. And here, if you look in the texture of this,
it's the actual moon.
It's the actual moon.
I did just realize that. Oh, that's amazing. I can't believe I missed that. It looks like it's all integrated, but it can't be, right? I mean, this isn't just put on his head. How does the actor breathe between takes?
So, I mean, what it actually comprises of is a pair of trousers,
Yeah.
a tack vest, which these parts are on,
Oh, okay.
a top, a short top with the sleeves, some gloves, the vambraces. These parts are attached to the tack vest. There's the cape, the hood. This collar's separate as well.
Okay.
And this mask is separate. And in fact, mainly because it was during lockdown and we had to pay attention to COVID regulations, we made sure that the actor would be able to have a break.
Oh, that's
and they could have a COVID-safe version.
I'm curious about your experience of watching the show for the first time and seeing your costume in motion.
We were all very, very excited.
Yeah.
All reporting back to each other that evening, and I think we were all really, really hyped and really excited when we saw it. It was like all that work had come together.
Yeah.
And also, it was such a quick turnaround. Normally, we wait up to a year, maybe even more, to see the thing that we've made.
Sure.
But this was on a really tight schedule, and it was only a few months after we'd made it, really, that this came out. And so it was still quite fresh, and that was also quite exciting to see it so soon.
Right.
We're so used to waiting.
The trauma is fresh in your memory. I'm curious about the pants, because they're slightly different than the top. They've got this cartouches going on and everything. Tell me about the development of that.
So we went with the idea of a tactical pant, but then still harkening back to some of these design features. So we've got, this is echoing all of this detail, and down the side here as well, we have more in there.
Now, when you're talking about echoing those details, is that something that the production designer are coming to you with, or are they asking you for solutions and you're giving options and showing them what's possible?
I mean, sometimes it comes from comes from the actor, sometimes it comes from the costume designer, sometimes from production. It's kind of like, it was quite a fluid conversation that we were having about it all. And I think it was ultimately that they decided that we needed to integrate it, but it not feel like one entire thing. And so a bit of back and forth, doing plenty of samples, giving them a few options, and this is what we all agreed upon was the best way to go. And then just adding more interest, like this is a higher build print. So it's the same print, but
slightly more relief.
Yeah, just so different textures, once again, echoing up here. And then here, we wanted to feel like it was like a real relief.
Yeah.
And so we decided the best way to do it was to laser cut the hieroglyphs here.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I don't know if anyone realises what it says, but
what does it say?
It says, "Rise and live again as my fist of vengeance, my beloved Moon Knight."
Amazing narrative built right in.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, can I pick up the boot?
Yeah.
The footwear is always the hardest part for me in the replication. Do you have someone who specializes in footwear?
There's a fantastic man who's in Canada. He's called Jitterbug Jeff, and he makes a lot of boots and shoes for film, and he's the go-to guy, really.
That's beautiful. So do you send a pattern? Do you send drawings?
So we took extensive foot measurements for him.
Fair.
He sent us through the information he wanted, and we sent those through to him, and then he makes them.
Amazing. I am really curious. The gloves are super beautiful, but I'm curious about this beautiful reduction pattern going on in the vambraces.
Yeah. So we spent quite a few weeks deciding what the best method to make this was, and we tried a few just purely fabric versions, and we'd sort of started to work out the pattern of these decreasing rhombuses as such. And then we did one sample, and it took so long to make one, we thought it was perhaps best, and for it to look clean as well.
Wait, these aren't fabric, they're...
So they're not fabric at all. So Najad, one of our digital artists, this is all done in ZBrush, and then this is just an extra detail glued on over the top.
I totally couldn't tell. Bex, you've described both a very collaborative, but also an iterative process of solving these problems. Can I see some of the samples of that iteration?
Yeah, sure. We've laid some out for you over here.
Oh man, I mean, every project ends up with a pile of stuff. Walk me through what some of this is. It looks like so much work.
This area here is initial trouser samples of how we wanted these details to look. And as you can see, these are every single possible version of a seam. Because we didn't want it to just be a normal seam. We wanted to have different textures, different ideas of depth in there.
Right.
So we had all these done, and then these details here, they eventually ended up being a ribbed detail. But these were all different ideas of how to do that.
Oh man. Okay, so this is one of the actual vambraces.
Yeah.
Oh, it's actually, I see, nice and soft.
Yeah.
It feels like it would be a comfortable costume to wear, even though there's a lot of parts.
Yeah, exactly. And this is quite, very important for stunts as well, because we really need to make sure that there's nothing brittle or sharp, that everything has to bend or, allow for some compression. And
this is, it's Velcro?
Yeah, you can open it.
Oh, look at that. Wow. Okay, so now we can see the inside where the pattern is. That's amazing. I was looking right at this and touching it and not realizing it wasn't fabric.
It's a beautiful paint job on it as well. In fact, the whole costume they went in every single seam and airbrushed into each little seam to create even more depth. Yeah.
So talk about these, how these pieces start to meet.
So this was an initial sort of trying to get your head around the construction. So we decided to start in a calico first. And this was a whole integrated sleeve.
Okay.
And we were trying to work out what happens if you seam it here, what happens if there's overlaps. Things like this we had to put to one side because stunts are going to get caught on those.
But when you're talking about the seam, you mean you want it to look like it's actually a bandage, not a seam. So how do you create that illusion?
So we went from this, and then we started testing in our actual final fabrics, unprinted. Okay. And we'd started working out how do we do these underlaps. with this one, we were like, well, this is too much of a gap. Any kind of stretch, you start to expose it. So we were, well, we're nearly there. We need to think about this a little more. But by the time, I mean, this is a slightly different print. By the time we got to this point, we were actually underlapping everything. And there's a really tight point where you have to hit there and everything's caught in under here. So you do actually have...
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
It does have space in it, but there's no room for it to move and show off the... Wow. That is so much freaking work. And there's a specific approach to each seam and how that sits?
Exactly. So these are all our seaming tests here as well, just purely for the bandage idea. And we tried doing it with a pleat because we were thinking, oh, we can't possibly cut out that many pieces. But in fact, this was actually a longer way to do it.
Oh, fascinating.
And not as secure either. There was, potential for it to pop too much, like you see there.
Oh, right. And if it stretches, you don't want to see that.
Exactly.
The actual, okay.
Yeah. So then we were like, okay, let's have another little think. And these are all, we came up eventually with, we bond a piece to it with our seam allowance net all around. One side is 2 millimeters, on the other side is net. And then as you sew it, and then you glue it and you roll it, and then that's what gives it the sense of the depth. So,
oh man,
I think some of these are like really good examples of how that ended up.
That's crazy. This feels like like we all make our things that we are good at making with a category and a library in our heads, but this looks like it added to your library significantly.
I mean, that's what we love doing as well. It's sort of, it's like, well, we'll figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
That is really the fun bit. The R&D at the beginning, just trying to decide how do we make this real.
Yeah. How many weeks was this problem-solving process before you started to get to construction?
It was probably a good month of back and forth.
That doesn't sound like nearly enough time.
Maybe 6 weeks. Because we were sort of like, as we could sign off one technique, we could start developing one part of it whilst we were waiting for another part of it.
Oh,
so
fair enough.
Say we get the trouser technique signed off, we can start working on those, get that make going whilst we're still working on this, so that we've got this constant flow of work and just progression happening with it all.
Right. And then at a certain point you're wheeling in some of the other parts of FBFX to do these other parts.
Exactly.
And iterating different hardnesses, different materials.
Yes, yeah.
What is the face shell?
So this is Mr. Knight, another one of his alter egos.
Oh, right.
And this is a very early vac form of his mask. And then we made a hood. I mean, this is the very, very simple first toile.
Right.
It's quite hilarious.
Amazing.
And the fantastic team over in Budapest made his suit.
Okay.
So yeah, we did all the masks.
I'm also noticing the beautiful neck cowl there.
Yes. So ultimately, the reason for deciding to split this costume into all these separate pieces is so that they've got as much choice as possible in like all the different kind of like stunt setups that they can do, and also just to allow for so much movement. It didn't want, because of the techniques of how we did it, you get stretch, but you don't get a lot of stretch. So we didn't want any kind of like long tension across the neck, that everything's free to move, hence why it's a tack vest with a separate top as well. So all underarm movement is like all as free as possible.
So you're making sure that the return of this goes far enough under that no matter how they move, it's not going to expose.
Exactly. And that we don't get that kind of like bridging between the body, that it always looks like it's formed to the body instead. And then that's another one of the overlapping techniques. And then we've got, all of them are sewn with stretch zips as well.
Stretch zips?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Wow.
So you get 10% out of them. And they're great, actually. Have been very, very useful.
I just learned a brand new thing. I didn't know I needed that in my life.
Neither did we until we got them. And then we're like, well, this is it now. So it's all hidden. And then we had this little underlap. Like it goes under like that.
Oh man!
So that you get
right.
Yeah.
So I I'm really astounded. It's hard, I think, maybe for the camera to see just how thin this is. This is like about as thin as a denim jacket, and it's so many layers.
Yeah, the inside's quite a...
Oh, that's magnificent.
And you can see our hilarious labeling system.
Oh, right. So with 1013, you had to number and letter some code for everything.
And we all sat down together and said, what system makes the most sense to everybody? So that we were all on board and all on the same page with it.
Wow. I mean, a project like this requires you guys to, all of you, sort of be investing the whole structure into your heads.
Yeah. Yeah, because you sort of have, everyone had their own kind of, everyone had a go at making all parts of the costume, but everyone had their kind of specialism within the costume to focus on as well, so that the technique would improve each time. And
I can see the airbrushing that you're talking about. It's very, very subtle, but it really lends, again, it looks much more dimensional than it is, and I can see how great that would be for a stunt performer. Yeah, exactly. Just really try not to limit their movement at all, or as much as possible. Did they send you some samples of what the kinds of movements that would happen?
Yeah, we saw some great, they did some quick blocking out of some of these scenes as well, and they were like really fascinating to see. So we could see what was required. There was one which required a full arm up as well. So we were like, we need to make sure that he's not going to...
You know, it's funny, after all of this problem solving, I think to myself, wow, you guys are like, you're building the most amazingly flexible superhero suits. It's like this incredible knowledge base you're building, but the next film will include problems you've never solved before.
Yeah, and everything's built on previous projects, everything that we've learned, things that we've learned to don't do that again. You know, like that's also as important, really, like knowing what our constraints are and
so you don't go up the wrong path again. It's the institutional knowledge.
Exactly. Like applying some constraints so you can like make sure you stay on the right path with it. But yeah, everything that we've learned on previous projects really sort of came into effect in this one, I think.
You know, it's not the illusion of depth. It's all there. I cannot believe how much labor went into this. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and everyone came out of it the other side as well. I mean, some of my team are actually here today as well, that I put them through this, and they happily joined me with it. I've got Poppy here, who I gave the task of these sleeves, which normally you'd say a sleeve probably take you really not that long to put together, but you had that. I mean, everyone had a little go at this. Amy, you were the knee specialist, I remember. You were on the knees. That was one thing we wanted to do, was integrate the knee pads into the suit so it looked like the knee pad was over. But there's all this pleating that I don't even know if you see it in the actual series.
You want to?
I mean, we can have a quick look actually. There's some pleating on the back of the knees. So if you see here behind the knee, we wanted this to feel like it was over the trousers.
Of course.
But it's actually all fully integrated in. So all this is draped into place. It won't move from this pleating arrangement. And then these are another hard part. And then this was glued over and wrapped around. And then we stitched the knee pad on.
Can I come here and apprentice for a week? Is that something that could happen someday?
We're always up for that, aren't we? Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And this cape, oh my goodness. Oh,
yeah, there was a lot of talk because it's so important that when it's open, it creates that shape.
Of course. Wow.
But so this is why we had to sort of seam it and then pleat it so that we didn't have the bulk of the fabric up here, but we've got
of
this here.
Because it comes up here, it's almost like a curtain, and then you have to remove all that.
And we couldn't do it like your standard sort of like a circle cape, because this back wanted to look clean. It was important that this looked flat, and then all the pleat and drape came from this point as well.
And so the solution is the pleat and drape comes from outside the center line. Oh,
exactly.
Fascinating. If anything, the costume is even more impressive now that I know how it was built. It is really a masterpiece.
Thank you. I think we can say we are proud of it now. Now enough time has passed. But it was, like I say, it was a very interesting costume making process as well, especially because of the lockdown factor. And we spent a lot of time on Zoom speaking to the costume designer, Meghan, And she would say, try this, I'm going to send you this fabric, we'll try this print. It gets sent over to us, we try out some versions, get that sent back to her, have every fitting that we had, have her on Zoom as well. Whilst the stuntmen are doing their spinning kits,
Right.
she's there going, okay, great. And then I remember one particular moment with the hood as well. We tried to get as close to the camera as possible, and just her guidance really on the fullness of the cape, and especially like all around here, this shape.
The silhouette and the lines and the shadow.
But it was a very interesting experience to work with a designer like that in those particular times, really, in those conditions. It's really fascinating. And then she'd go back to Marvel, get Marvel approval, come back to us. It's very much like a constant back and forth. You have to like stay in constant communication, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, clearly it was worth it.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing work.